The statistics are staggering. According to the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention in the U.S. Department of Justice, on any given day in 2013, more than 54,000 children under 17 were held in juvenile detention centers in America. In 2014, over 4,000 kids under 18 were housed in adult jails, and just over 1,000 inmates 17 or younger were in custody in state prison institutions. Many of the adults in prison serving long sentences now were under 18 when they committed their crimes. So why are these numbers so high? Peter K. Enns says that the incarceration rate for almost all offenses began to climb back in the 1970s when the tough on crime movement took hold. Enns is an associate professor in the Department of Government at Cornell University and executive director of the Roper Center for Public Opinion Research. He's also author of the book, Incarceration Nation: How the United States Became the Most Punitive Democracy in the World.
If we look back at the data back into the 1950s, the U.S. incarceration rate wasn't especially distinct. In fact, it was in between the incarceration rate of Finland and Denmark. So this has been a decades-long process to get to this title of the world's incarceration leader, and started really in the 70s, 80s, through the 90s, and it was mostly due to political changes, policy changes in terms of changing mandatory sentencing, so crimes that previously didn't carry a prison sentence, having a mandatory sentence, extending the length of sentences, rules like three strikes laws, where a third convicted felony could lead to, for example, in California, a 25-year to life sentence. These changes in how we punish certain crimes are the main factor in the rise of mass incarceration.
Enns says that now there are about 2.2 million people incarcerated in the U.S., and it's not just the fault of the politicians. He says that the public, with the help of the media, took a tougher line on law and order during the last part of the 20th century.
As the crime rate was going up in the 60s and 70s, and media was covering this, media tends to cover crime in a certain way, tends to over-report violent crime, focus more on violent crime, tends to focus on the specific nature of the crime as opposed to talking about the broad picture and ways to maybe address the roots of crime or social issues. The media reporting on rising crime rates in a very specific way was a major factor in why the public became so punitive in the first place.
And says that, ironically, the big headline crimes aren't the ones that put the majority of people in prison.
So a lot of the increase in the incarceration rate was changes in how we prosecute low-level drug offenders, like possession of small amounts of illegal drugs or those caught buying drugs. And so, of course, violent crime is part of the story and matters for the incarceration rate, but it's not nearly the whole story.
Jean Traunstein is professor at Middlesex Community College in Lowell, Massachusetts. She found out how the Get Tough on Crime movement and media attention could affect a case against a juvenile. Traunstein is the author of the book Boy with a Knife, a story of murder, remorse, and a prisoner's fight for justice. She started a correspondence with Carter Kane Reed, a young white man from the poor side of town in New Bedford, Massachusetts, whose father was incarcerated on drug charges. Carter was convicted of second-degree murder for the 1993 stabbing of a classmate when he was 16 and was serving a life sentence in adult prison.
My sense from all of the things that I read, and I read a lot of different newspapers, is that a portrait of boys who didn't care, boys who were intentionally out to kill. Words like monster, killer Carter, they called him stone cold. They said the boys laughed joyfully after the murder, high-fived, things like that. There were a lot of different people who saw a lot of different things, and they were reported, even though they were hearsay, they were reported in the media and created a picture in people's mind. That, I think, happens a lot. But I think it happens in a way that does not give the person a chance to sort of exist on their own merit. You get this image before the trial even occurs.
Traunstein says that the murder occurred when a classmate made an obscene remark about Carter's friend Nigel's mother. Carter and Nigel, along with another friend, Gator, went looking for the name caller in a classroom at school. He wasn't there, but a friend of his, Jason Robinson, was.
Carter's standing at the doorway. He is a small guy. He's never stood up for himself. He wants to prove himself. He believed in loyalty above all else. And as Jason goes by, he takes his knife out of his pocket, which was always something he carried to school, open in his pocket, never used it, and he stabs him. And had no connection in my mind that he would kill him. He wanted to harm him. He thought he'd be a hero for harming him. But it never occurred to him in his 16-year-old brain that you stab someone and you kill him.
Traunstein doesn't excuse Carter for what he did. The killing of a young boy is always a tragedy for the family and the community, and she says that Carter should be held accountable for it. What she takes exception to is that Carter was expected to pay the adult price of life in prison for actions he took as a child. Traunstein says that kids aren't adults. Their brains don't completely mature until their early to mid-20s. Before maturity, young people's temperaments and decision-making skills can be woefully underdeveloped.
More impulsivity with kids, less ability to see in the future, meaning to know the consequences of one's actions. I just imagine going into a school in the middle of the day, going into a classroom to have a fight. I mean, who is thinking like that? You have to not be aware of the consequences of your actions. So that's a perfect example. And then third, I would say a sort of an increased sense of emotionality and drama with the importance of things. The sort of overemphasis on things is also sort of a feature of childhood. And finally, peer pressure, the being influenced by other kids.
Traunstein says life for a teenager in an adult prison can be brutal, with sexual assault, intimidation, and time in solitary for their own protection, real possibilities. Traunstein says that Carter turned his life around in prison, becoming an intelligent, well-read, and industrious young man, despite the violence and intimidation of adult prison life. When he came up for parole after 15 years behind bars, the board decided he could be released. However, in pre-release, something happened that changed his life yet again.
Carter had a lot of aches and pains from glucosamine chondroitin, and he wanted to get glucosamine chondroitin, which is an over-the-counter supplement. I take it for arthritis. He asked someone to get him some from the commissary. There wasn't any in the prison where he was at, and he was really close to getting out. Under 4 months or something, he would have been at 6 months, he would have been out. They got him this stuff, and she said, by the way, get me 6 extra pairs of underpants, because they didn't have clean underpants or new underpants. And he got it, and then his locker was raided, and they immediately threw him back into a secure facility.
The parole board decided that this small infraction was enough to rescind his parole, and Carter was sent back to prison. Carter spent his time learning the law and finding a pro bono attorney to secure his parole. He sued the parole board and finally got out. But Traunstein says that Carter shouldn't have had to serve his sentence or plead for his parole the way an adult would. He should have been tried and able to serve his sentence in a juvenile facility.
I think the juvenile system is totally able to handle this. People think the juvenile system is, piece of cake, some kind of flutter game or something. It's what makes prison is you're isolated from people that you love. That's what makes prison. Loneliness. I would change the length of time we have kids be behind bars. I would give them much more programming. I would do what Germany does. I would train my people to work with them to be counselors. They have to take training for 2 years. Our correction officers are trained for maybe 8 weeks. I'd have them be trained in psychology and health. I'd help them develop into the kind of person I want my own child to be.
To read the story of a juvenile sentenced as an adult for murder and his journey through the justice system, read Jean Traunstein's book, Boy with a Knife, and visit her site at jeantraunstein.com. For information on Peter K. Enns and his book, Incarceration Nation, visit his site at peterenns.org. For information about all of our guests, log on to our site at viewpointsonline.net. You can find archives of past programs there and on iTunes and Stitcher. Our show is written and produced by Evan Rook. Studio production is done by Jason Dickey. Our executive producer is Reed Pence. I'm Marty Peterson.
There's nothing like taking some time for a fresh cup of coffee or a creamy latte to slow down a hectic day. And now, if you're busy at home, you don't have to run out to a coffee house to get it. The new Keurig K-Latte single-serve coffee and latte maker allows coffee lovers to enjoy regular single-serve coffee or lattes in the comfort of their own home. Use any K-Cup pod to brew coffee or make delicious lattes. While most specialty coffee makers can be complicated, time-consuming, and messy, the Keurig K-Latte Coffee House Brewer is simple to use, allowing consumers to prepare coffee or lattes in minutes. Add a splash of delicious flavor with Torani for an authentic coffeehouse drink at home. Torani has been making gourmet-flavored syrups and sauces for beverages from high-quality ingredients like pure cane sugar and natural flavors since 1925. The Keurig K-Latte single-serve coffee and latte maker is available exclusively at Walmart and Walmart.com for only $99. Just brew, froth, and enjoy.
What are you going to do with your old car? You can try selling it, you could junk it, or you can donate it to Heritage for the Blind. Your car will be towed away for free and your donation is tax deductible. Just call 1-800-835-1478. Heritage for the Blind accepts cars, vans, trucks, and boats. It doesn't matter if your vehicle runs or not. It will be towed away for free, and you'll be supporting those that need help. Heritage for the Blind is a nonprofit organization that helps the visually impaired live fuller lives. Call right now to donate your car, and as a special thank you, you'll receive a free 3-day vacation voucher to over 50 locations. Call Heritage for the Blind right now. Call 1-800-835-1478. Donating is easy, and your vehicle is towed away for free. Plus, you'll get a free vacation voucher for donating. Call now, 1-800-835-1478. That's 1-800-835-1478.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Viewpoints is a production of Media Tracks Communications. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook to learn about upcoming shows and find a library of past programs on iTunes. Plus, you'll always find podcasts of our segments and information about our guests at viewpointsonline.net. Join us again next week for your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.